Hello, hello. We're going to go through parts of this slide pretty quickly because I had actually added slides to our last PowerPoint because I thought they skipped things that were in our book, but they were just in the next slideshow. So you have to think, what do you think is credit, good or bad? And hopefully from what we've talked about, we've established that there are times when it's good and there are pitfalls, so there are times when it's bad. So it's how we use it. It's not necessarily the credit that's good or bad. So today we're going to look at like some of the what are my legal responsibilities, because when you sign a contract, that is a legal document. Guidelines for borrowing that we did already talk about. Where can you get help if you have credit problems, and trying to just make sure that you're responsible about borrowing. So sometimes there are times that we think something would affect our credit score, and maybe it will or maybe it won't. And honestly, I did not create this original PowerPoint, and I'm not sure the word when here, if that's really appropriate, but anyway. So these things, do you think they help your credit score? Paying your bills on time. Woohoo! Yes! Paying on time is the single best way to be sure that you have a good credit score. So that also means paying your bills late makes you have a bad credit score. Opening several accounts in a short period of time. No, this actually hurts your score. Makes it look like you're desperate to borrow, and you may end up being overextended because several people are issuing you credit and you may not have the capacity to pay all of them. So that does not. So slow and steady, not a bunch of accounts opening at once. Owning a credit card, but you don't ever use it. So you're not racking up debt, but it doesn't help your credit score. So if there's no activity for a long time, then it may just be regarded as if it were inactive. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but it just doesn't raise your credit score. How about moving your credit card balances to new cards because they offer a better interest rate? Notice this says frequently doing that. Call that card hopping, kind of like people who job hop. And it actually decreases the average age of your accounts. And they like to see that you have some consistency. So occasionally may not be a bad plan to save some money interest-wise, but it does negatively affect your credit score when you're doing that. So it may help you save a little money, but in the long run, if you're trying to get like a home loan or something, it may end up hurting you because it will decrease the credit score if you're frequently doing that. So how about getting a credit card, but you already have a car loan and a student loan? Now again, this is not necessarily saying how much you're going to use it. You're going to use it a little bit, but does it help your credit score? It does help your credit score because they like to see a mix. So having a loan and credit cards. So for instance, for me, right now I don't have any loans. So in some ways that actually hurts my credit, but at this point I'm okay with that because I'm not trying to build credit. I'm not trying to get it higher because I don't need a loan for something else. But when you're getting started, again, slowly, but then having a mix of credit. So how about like you've made a lot of late payments on one of your credit cards, and so you just want to close that account. Well, closing it, it's still like the fact that you made all those late payments, it's still there. If closing it is going to mean you're not using it and racking up more debt, that might be smart for you, but just know that those negative items, as far as affecting your credit report, don't just go away because you closed the account. How about using your debit card responsibly? This is a little bit tricky because it does help you maintain a good relationship with your bank or credit union, which might help you get a loan with them. But your debit card doesn't actually show up in a credit report. Okay, so those are withdrawals from your bank account. You're not really borrowing for someone. So that doesn't raise your credit score. Now, if you get a bad reputation with your bank, that could end up hurting it. But debit cards don't show up in our credit score. So just know that if you don't use credit responsibly, that embarrassing feeling, sometimes when it's just a mix-up, but that like, sorry, we can't take your card, and you're like, what? And obviously if you've overextended yourself, that would be even more so. Having property such as a car repossessed, the personal stress of always being in debt and being overwhelmed, maybe getting those phone calls and letters, then not being eligible for good rates, having to have higher interest rates, and then the late fees, that kind of snowballs. And those negative details on your credit report that may then not just affect credit, but your housing, employment. You could have your wages garnished. Remember, garnished means they take legal action so that the money that you owe for a debt is like removed from your paycheck before you get it. This can happen with child support or court fees, and it can happen with debt if you get a legal a legal judgment against you. Sorry. Collection agencies, when those companies just give it to someone else, that's when you really start getting lots and lots of phone calls. And then you might have, if they have to take legal action against you to get you to pay, they can actually then add that fees for the legal action onto what you owe. Again, that snowball can get pretty ugly. So a contract, this is an agreement between two parties. It's legal. You want to take, like they're giving you an offer of a certain thing, you have to accept it. You need to have the capacity to pay it back. They need to have the capacity for loaning you the money, or that your credit card's going to be good, whatever that is. And just remember that ignorance is no excuse. So just because, but I didn't know. That fine print, you want to know what's in there. So in the fine print, you'll see things like, how much do you have to pay all the time? When is the payments going to be due? What's going to happen if you don't make a payment or it's late? Are you required to keep insurance? For instance, if you have a car loan, then you're typically required to keep full coverage insurance on that car, with your lender, your lien holder, being named as the beneficiary if it gets totaled or if there are damages. And then in your contract is also going to be, if there's changes, who do I tell? If I have problems, who do I contact? And then they will typically send out updates, and pay attention to those, especially if you carry any balance, because interest rates can change, and oftentimes if you've had late payments, that can force your credit card into a higher interest rate, which would all be in your contract. Now, there are people on your side. Federal Trade Commission, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So these are some agencies and some laws that are around to protect all of us. Let me go back to that for just a second. And so this is like, this requires them to have the information in the contract. No one can force you to read it, but these laws force them to give people equal opportunities, make sure that things are fair the way it's being reported, make sure that they're telling you all the things and if there are changes. And our 2010 rule, we talked about that, that our total debt should be less than 20% of our net annual income, and that our monthly payments should be less than 10% of our monthly net income. This is what we worked on last week. And there we go. This is just kind of, the bottom one is just kind of a formula depending on what you put in for your number. And those numbers should look familiar. We found those amounts last week. We also talked about being a shrewd borrower last week. So just as a reminder, what that shrewd means. And then there will be a second PowerPoint today.